Welcome back, everyone, to Calliope Music Reviews. My name is Colin, and this is the Music Canon. Now listen, I know I've been gone for a while. I've only had a couple releases in the last couple months, but I'm gonna make up for it today, okay? Today we have, as you can see, a lot to talk about, okay? We have almost 30 albums that I've been listening to for the past couple months that I haven't had time to release full reviews for. So today we're going to be forming a bit of a tier list, trying something new here, and hopefully recommending you something that I like and maybe helping you avoid something that I really don't like. So before we get into it though, I want to go over what the tier list actually means, what these ratings mean, just so you have an idea of where they are on my scale. So starting with the middle, the C tier, this is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a mid-album. It's something that doesn't really have too many high highs, doesn't have too many low lows. It's just mid overall. It's like a 4 to a 5.5 out of 10 on my scale. Moving down, we go to the D tier. This is just a bad album. Pretty self-explanatory. And then going to F, this is a really bad album. This is definitely not something I would ever recommend. This is like the 2 out of 10s and lower. But then going up to the positives for the B tier, these are pretty good albums. These are your 6.5 out of 10s. The albums that I would recommend to fans of those genres for sure. And then moving on to A tier albums, these are great albums. These are your 7s to your 8.5 out of 10s. These are albums that are probably going to be in my top 50 of the year. And then S tier, these are just incredible albums. These are your 9 out of 10s. You know, maybe only come around once or twice in this time frame. And I could add an S plus for like all-time great albums, but you know, we'll get to that. We'll see if there are any here today. Okay, but now that that is out of the way, let's just get straight into it. Let me not waste your time. This is probably going to be a pretty long video, so just sit back, relax, and hopefully you enjoy my yapping about these albums. Okay, so the first album on the chopping block is the Canadian rapper and producer Backxwash and their album Only Dust Remains. So Backxwash is actually a pretty interesting artist who got their start in the experimental hip-hop scene around 2018 with the release of their debut EP, Freaks. She would then develop her very morbid sound into a metal and industrial mixture of horrorcore hip-hop, taking inspiration from the likes of Kanye West and Clipping, who I've reviewed earlier on this channel. Her 2021 album, I Lie Here Buried With My Rings and My Dresses, began a larger focus on a fierce political commentary, getting angrier with every track. And this horrorcore sound would be improved upon again with 2022's His Happiness Shall Come First, Even Though We Are Suffering, being her most concise and conscious project yet. And that brings us to 2025 and Only Dust Remains, once again bringing that signature passion and anger, but in a much more artsy and abstract manner than before, almost entirely ditching the horrorcore aesthetics of before. This is epic, heavily Kanye-inspired hip-hop instrumentals with 808s and heartbreaks being probably the biggest inspiration for this sound. You got grisly guitars, auto-tuned vocal flexes, shiny piano keys, and plenty of soulful harmonies all over the production. Themes of toxicity, of gender-normative society, trans identity, personal legacy, suicide, substance abuse, and a broad political commentary of the Israel-Palestine conflict are littered throughout this record and really add a lot of depth to it. And this record just has insane sampling, from the hypnotic vocal snippets to the imposing guitar solos and dramatic piano sections. It has consistently heavy bass that anchors pretty varied percussion, from syncopated electronics to old school conscious hip hop beats, some rap rock drumming even, and the production here is just excellent all around. A real eclectic but consistent mixture in its strength and grand environment of foaming guitars, spaced keys, and scintillating synths. While the messaging here is seriously potent and raw, with some memorable refrains like on Wake Up and the drummer coming part on Ninth Heaven, I personally am not the biggest fan of Backxwash's voice and rap flows as a whole. They're heavy and violent, but kind of get caught up in a pretty basic, bitter wordplay and rhyme schemes with little or no melody a lot of the time. But that being said, Only Dust Remains is easily Backxwash's most creative and consistent project at this point in their discography, and is absolutely worth a listen. I mean, the production is just a treat to listen to. I'm feeling a 7.5 and an easy A to start off this list. Strong start. Okay, where is he? The second album I want to talk about is To Hollis, the Californian-based electropop and EDM singer and producer, and his fourth studio album, Star. So if you're familiar with my older reviews, then you'll know that I really enjoyed To Hollis's 2024 album Boy, as it combined his crashing electro-clash production with a more concise and narratively driven pop songwriting. Ended up making my top 50 albums of the year last year, actually. This new record, Star, however, is honestly, it's a bit of a step back. Don't get me wrong, these songs still have some entertaining and quite flashy dance production that definitely goes hard during a workout or a run, but there's just something missing here, and that something is the energy in the songwriting. I would say Hollis was really starting to gain a reputation for some of the hardest hitting metallic sub-bass drops and beat breaks before this record came out. But those unfortunately are largely missing here. Songs like Cope, Girl, and Eldest Child, while maintaining a sleek and futuristic aesthetic and atmosphere, just kind of lack that energy that a dance record should have, or at least that I would want it to have. There are some standouts, like the aggressively shaky bass on Sidekick, and Hollis is clearly an improved vocalist on this album, but overall, the sound is a safer, more commercial pop rap direction that makes this record about a 5 out of 10, a mid-tier album, and the C tier. Alright, the next album is from a newish UK indie rock band called Panchiko, and their sophomore effort, Gingko, I think is how it's pronounced. This guy right here. Now, aside from being pushed an insane amount on my Spotify algorithm for some reason, I can't say I've really been into this band that much. However, from what I have heard before, it's pretty standard, sleazy indie rock with some nice neo-psych and dream pop atmospherics that add some cool depth. So giving this new record a try, I have to say it's solid, other than the unexpected and completely out of place Billy Woods feature on the third track, which we'll get to Billy Woods later. Every song here is one way or another just another endearing little pack of distorted Strokes guitars, simple percussion, and trickling electronics that go by without much hassle or experimentation. If you're really into this kind of calm, easygoing indie sound with a slight down-tempo flavor, then you should definitely check this out. Personally, I don't think it does quite enough to differentiate itself and can be a little slow and ultimately not too memorable overall. It's still nice, like a 5.5 out of 10 and another C-tier album for me. Alright, next we have the third studio record from Australian alt-metal group Thornhill. The album is called Bodies and is another rageful, gazing metal project that takes a slight pop twist compared to their more progressive previous efforts. The main attractors here are the industrial guitar riffs, the slap feel drums, and a pretty epic explosive mix of melodies that give the album a clean darkness to push some fun headbangers throughout its 37-minute runtime. Of course, this sound is obviously heavily, and I mean heavily, inspired by Deftones in pretty much every way possible. Even the lead singer here, Jacob Charlton, goes for those sustained, shrill high notes of Deftones' Chino Moreno. And I would say this influence works. I mean, the tracks have a good amount of power to them, especially in those vocals and guitars. But there is a lack of nuance here that unsettles me a little. For one, the drumming is extremely monochromatic. It hits hard and sharp, but sticks to very simple rhythms without any real decadence or variance that I usually look for in metal percussion. The production is rather stale too, very clean and well mixed, but missing any sort of rawness that could benefit this kind of sound. And then there are the more floaty, leisurely moments that just come off as sedate to me, making you wait for the actual cool riffage and melody to come back in. Especially on the 9th track, Crush, where the band sort of takes a stab at alternative R&B to, I would say, mixed results. Overall, the new Thornhill isn't bad. There's plenty of value in the guitar work and the catchy songwriting, but like the Panchiko record, really, it's not quite effective in standing on its own to any real substance. So I'd say it's another 5 and addition to the C tier. Alright, this one might be a little controversial, hopefully not. As you can see, the next album is the indie folk singer-songwriter legend Bon Iver and his 5th full-length release, Fable, I think is how you say it. But first and foremost, I'm a huge fan of Bon Iver's early music. I think Emma might be the first album to actually make me shed a tear. I've listened to it countless times, and it still hits the same today. Love that record. But that being said, this new album, Fable, is less of an indie folk experience from the past and more of a pop soul experience, emphasizing these spacious atmospheres and an instrumental minimalism to highlight Iver's older, wiser voice. And I think these tender environments of acoustic guitars, strings, and light piano are the best part of the record, swaying gently as Iver's deep resonations contrast in very smooth and satisfying headspace overall. The messaging here is quite nice too, with simple naturalistic imagery pointing towards a slow breakup of some sorts, whether it's between a lover or even his listeners who expect a certain sound from him, like I maybe did before as well. Unfortunately, this level of minimalism here, it isn't quite supported enough by the lyrics or the melodies. Let's be honest, despite plenty of lyricless chamber excursions, the verses here are pretty repetitive, and the vocals aren't necessarily detailed enough to keep such simple phrasing engaging in their entirety. Couple that with bare instrumentation, some ambitious reverb, and a sluggish cadence, and the record ends up sounding kind of like a sad interlude between sermons at your local megachurch. Now, it obviously has a level of depth that goes far beyond those megachurch tracks and offers some seriously beautiful melodies with cool little electronic drum techniques like on Everything Is Peaceful Love, but ultimately it stultifies in its bare bones approach. So I'm feeling 4.5 out of 10 and another C tier for Bon Iver. Okay, the next album to be released, I believe, was this Ken Carson album, More Chaos. And this one could be even more controversial. We'll see. This is the Opium rapper's fourth studio album and is a follow-up to his 2023 exciting raid extraordinaire, A Great Chaos. More Chaos is, well, more of the same, except where A Great Chaos actually had some awesome, nail-biting, chippy production with complimentary, quick-to-the-point, catchy songwriting. More Chaos leaves quite a bit to be desired. From start to finish, the entire record is just full blast violence with these drilling 8-bit textures and this massive 808 bass, never stopping for air. Just never. And while this style of production has always been pretty sick aesthetically, I think it's starting to run its course when delivered in this way. The album is just, it's one note. It never strays from its tempo or instrumentation. Every single song sounds just about the same because it uses the same distorted guitar and the same exact 808 bass with only slight changes to the rhythms or the sub bass or maybe the sampled guitars. I love the visceral feel of the crunchy distortion that's layered to monstrous proportions, but it gets so old so quickly in the context of this hour-long album. Individually, each track has its purpose other than any meaningful lyrics or messaging. That's off the board, of course. But when put one after another with no variance or further experimentation on the sound, and well, it gets sleepy. No lie, despite the insanely loud and vicious sound of the record, I found myself dozing to the monotony of the songwriting on display here. I'm really not feeling this new Ken Carson. I'm thinking about a 3 out of 10 and the first D tier on the list. Next up, we gotta talk about that new Natalia Lafourcade. The longtime Mexican singer-songwriter has honestly become a staple in Latin folk music, balancing both popularity with critical acclaim in her 7 studio releases in the last decade. I remember absolutely falling in love with her silky smooth vocals on 2015's Hasta la Ruiz and being blown away by the jazzy wonderland that is her 2022 classic De Todas las Flores. And I wish I could say the same for Cancionera. This new record is an even more delicate chamber jazz and folk experience recorded live with a band in just one take, apparently. If that doesn't impress you, then Natalia's vocals are sure to, because damn, she might have the most beautiful voice in folk music right now. It's so gentle but confident, balancing energetic highs with smooth mids and airy lows. She breathes just so much life into the music, and you can tell the backing band feeds off of her energy, making for an incredibly organic experience here. And this natural and free feel is what makes the album pretty comforting as Natalia navigates an empowering reflection of creativity, channeling her hometown Veracruz sound through mystical imagery, sweeping string work, and that rich flamenco guitar. The introductory aperture even sounds like a delicate floral version of the Godfather theme song, basking in tender rhythms and warm environments. My only problem with this record is, well, it doesn't really go anywhere. The progressions are so soft and minimal, it seems like the songs kind of just float away before I can grab them, or rather they linger in this float state of extended periods, losing interest even among those beauteous vocals and fantastical poetry. The record can be especially interesting when it decides on moodier tones like the slick electric guitar on Luna Creciente, but each progression seems to overstay its welcome just a little bit for a concise experience. I really want to love this record, and I can see how it's extremely comforting for a lot of people, but the lack of instrumental depth just makes me want to go back to De Todos las Flores. Nonetheless, Cancionera is still a good album, a light 6.5 out of 10, and a welcomed addition to B tier. Alright, switching gears entirely, the Swedish punk band 5-piece Viagra Boys recently dropped their 4th semi-self-titled album on April 25th. And to keep things brief about this record, I like it. It's their usual mix of social commentary and fierce punk grooves that are simultaneously hilarious and pretty concerning. But yeah, the first track, Man Made of Meat, kind of serves as the album's thesis, introducing this toxic male character that is explored throughout the rest of the record. And while sometimes the band can come off as a bit campy in their over-the-top delivery, this album slaps along pretty nicely with animated garage drums, rowdy guitars, and an ever-present filter effect that gives it an abrasive edge. If you're into punk and sarcasm, then Viagra Boys are the band for you. And this album is more of that fun, charged commentary with some genuinely sick moments too, like the guitar and synthesizer combo on Pyramid of Health. I don't think it quite sticks the landing with some of the more basic dance sections, but it's an overall decent album for sure, and an easy 6 out of 10 and B tier. Okay, so this next album is from a pretty small French post-rock band making their second go at it in the studio, and that is BRUIT's The Age of Ephemerality. This album is a cinematic and airy drone-based post-rock record running about 40 minutes long. It has a slight apocalyptic feel through its voice excerpts and the gradual buildups of distortion and individual electronics, and very industrial feel as well. It's slow-paced, simple movements make for grand environments, but never really decorate to the point of being super satisfying. It's definitely very Godspeed You Black Emperor influenced, but can't quite capture the addicting movements and calculated buildups of that band. Some of the more string-focused moments here are actually reminiscent of the atmospheric wood lodge aesthetics of an aglock, especially on this track Progress/Regress. And I would say that this album has the bare bones production, but in a good way. It doesn't fiddle with any unnecessary instruments or decorations. It's an essentials only kind of sound. Nonetheless, a solid ambient take on post-rock with a good foundation for crushing atmospherics and large-scale instrumentation with a nice electronic twinge, and you get yourself another high 6.5 out of 10 and an easy B tier. Alright, I hope you all are staying with me. We have obviously a lot of records to go, but also feel free to look through the timestamps for whatever album that you're most interested in. Next we have the European Act, another European Act, and the third full-length release from UK producer DjRUM called Under Tangled Silence. This is definitely DjRUM's breakout album, I would say, and is some absolutely beautifully produced IDM with a graceful classical subtext. Aphex Twin-inspired bouncy ball beats mixed with wiry synthetics and glacé embellishments make this album pretty interesting. It's got fantastic soft and fizzy textures that are complemented by elegant string work and some adventurous little piano compositions, pretty effortless in its juxtaposition. Everything is captured in a large and echoing atmosphere, giving plenty of room for all these synthetic balls to bounce around your head and settle in a wide variety of low-tempo beats. It is a bit too low-tempo for pretty long periods of time, though, making the album seem a bit one note by the end, despite having a wide variety of textures and melodies. But it's such a well-produced and environmental record that just doesn't quite have the songwriting to click on repeated listens with its 62-minute runtime. Definitely a good album, though, something all IDM fans should definitely check out, and I think it's another low 6.5 and B tier. This next one's kind of a big one. We have the modern indie rock legends, I would say, Car Seat Headrest, and what I believe is their 12th studio album called The Scholars. Now, this album is a bit different from the slacker rock projects of their past and their most recent pop-focused album, Making a Door Less Open. Instead, we get a real classic-sounding progressive rock record with Will Toledo's signature power pop and high-speed indie rock sleaze, funneled into these ambitious track lengths and operatic structures of shouting melodies and organ and piano dramatics. You get an album that is very reminiscent of The Who's Quadrophenia and other progressive rock operas of the 70s, but with a modern twist in theme and perspective. This is a wonderfully powerful album with bumping bass lines and boisterous refrains that keep airy tone as instrumentals and vocals always feel like they're coming down from above you. Especially that "you can love again, you can try again" refrain, that's pretty sick. But it's refreshing to hear this kind of sound done well in 2025. That being said, the record doesn't necessarily offer any new innovations on the sound, making it both a quality but dry effort when it comes to the instrumental makeup and the songwriting. It's an overall bright and inspirational tone with some incredibly fun guitar riffs, especially on the 18-minute epic Planet Desperation, and the entire band contributes vocally, but the vast majority comes from the lead, Will Toledo, and there are a lot of vocals on this record, which sound good and fit the music well, but can get tiresome when Toledo goes on and on with similar notes and nasally highs. Speaking of, the lyrics are conceptual. It's a concept album providing pretty broad interpretations of love and religion in the scope of a rather developed and complex lore of characters set in the Car Seat Headrest canon. Each song is in a different character's perspective and provides separate entryways into this overarching narrative, but I think the central gist is sort of a coming-of-age story where the main character tries to find their purpose in life amidst a modern subtext of religious legitimacy, cancel culture, death, celebrity idolization, betrayal. Like I said, it gets pretty dramatic. And there's definitely a lot to dive into here if you're willing to. I don't think the strict narrative is exactly the most interesting or impactful, but the concepts are there, and just listening to the album normally, they are widely applicable and add a lot of value to the record. So in the end, The Scholars is an ambitious, more progressive direction for the band that works out pretty well while not quite blowing me away in any particular way. Therefore, I'm thinking another pie 6.5 out of 10 and a B tier album for sure. Our good friend Mike. So I covered Mike in detail through his album Showbiz earlier this year. Go check out that video if you haven't. But he's already back with another installment in his trap and plug-inspired pinball series, hooking back up with Brooklyn producer Tony Seltzer. Pinball II is another laid-back, bouncy trap affair, separate from Mike's usual sample-heavy, abstract hip-hop sound. And there's really not much to say about this one. It's definitely solidly produced with the clicky, synth-heavy trap music and sleazy beats and even sleazier rhymes. The beats, though, are nothing crazy and offer some pretty cool rubbery movements, especially in the bass loops. But Mike's flows aren't anything crazy either here, arguably more slurred and lethargic than usual. And overall, you get some well-produced bops like Sin City and Jumanji with Earl's Sweatshirt, but the wordplay and depth just isn't quite up to par with Mike's solo work. So I'm thinking a nice little 5.5 out of 10 and a C tier for Pinball II. Moving on. Okay, wow. This album is the debut from a new band that's kind of a subsidiary of the now discontinued LA noise rock outfit Sprain. And just as one might expect, Shearlings, that's the band's name,
motherfucker, I am both amen and hallelujah,
is another heavy, existential, hour-long straight of ugly noise, electroacoustic glitch, and avant-garde droning. The album is just one song and really plays like a violent journal entry of lead singer Alex Kent, even more than Sprain ever did. Starting with the good, though, there is an overwhelming abundance of quirk in this album. The many experimentations of post-rock build-ups, noisy excursions, and some pretty chamber and folk elements make the record a boundary-breaking experience of surrealist and totalist emotion. Like, this record will definitely capture your attention whether you like it or not. And that brings me to the bad. Well, I said this about Sprain's 2023 project, The Lamb as Effigy, and Alex Kent's vocals and verse, they can just be quite ostentatious. Don't get me wrong, the central message here is poignant, and Kent's vocals do a great job at communicating the brutal and deranged truths of religious constructs, existentialism, and finding an identity true to yourself, even though life and society do everything in their power to give you an identity of their making. And that's great and all, but to metaphorically suffer alongside the band, you must physically suffer as well. The vocals just get obnoxious, the constant toneless screaming and yelling and the dissonance of it all, it's just not fun to listen to. Kent's voice is honestly the opposite of attractive. I can understand the yells and the screams as a point of emphasis, but when the entire record revolves around it, it becomes way too much. Like I said, there are some fantastic experimental rock moments on this, and I think it's still worth listening to for those who want to stay up to date with the more innovative minds in rock music. But the album ultimately sounds like babysitting your recently escaped insane asylum friend in an abandoned quarry. So it's worth a listen, but just be prepared for some burnout with the vocals. It's like a 5.5 out of 10 and a C tier album. But moving on, another dip into noise rock, we have the Canadian one-man band Kim Elliott, aka SENTRIES, and his new album, I think his third record, Gems of the West. Now this is very choppy, highly anodic beat-style percussion with a fizzy, whirring electronics and guitar to match. And it's some pretty cool guitar work on this album. Noisy and guttural in the right places, constantly pounding in 1-2 rhythms, heavy kicks and sharp snares pushing with every single beat. There are violent vocals that pound along as sizzling guitar builds waves of this digitized distortion. And although it's quite artsy and pleasing to hear, the sound, like I've said about a few of these other albums, gets a little tedious as the patterns repeat with very little variation, often leading to similar ending progressions. It is a moody and punctual album, albeit a little dry when those frizzled textures start to fray with repetition. And pretty much every track here ends with a triumphant crescendo of blending guitars and smashing cymbals, which sound cool. It just often takes a little too long to get there for it to be entirely satisfying. Now, the last two tracks really tied the sound together that Sentries are going for, with a more balanced blend of noisy guitar-driven build-ups and slower atmospheric moments that give the album a potent junction to feed off of and communicate its personal and philosophical messages quite well. It's certainly a solid project, and I actually think it's worth listening to for any art and noise rock enthusiast. I'm going to give it like a solid 6.5 out of 10, and definitely another B tier. Of similar quality, one of the most interesting acts in contemporary R&B right now is Erika de Casier, who just came out with her 4th studio album, Lifetime. And this record is moody with some of the most wonderfully dreamy hi-fi R&B environments. It's like a luxurious date night in the city, lying comfortably next to your partner on the hotel sofa. It's also like a more digitized Sade in a way, with its soft R&B aesthetics, minimal drum work, and Erika's incredibly silky and comforting vocals. Now, even though it is incredibly silky smooth, it's not quite Sade. The cadence can be a little too slow when song structures and refrains repeat, although no track stays for too long for the record to become truly tedious. And it's got quick and easy progressions, not particularly catchy, but satisfying to follow along to Erika's simple little refrains and romantic pulses. And it's overall an extremely chilled out, just very solid contemporary R&B record, a solid 6.5 out of 10, and a B tier album. Staying on the contemporary R&B train, the Colombian queen herself, Calliope, just dropped her 5th studio album called Sincerely, Calliope is back here with an incredibly soulful release, replacing those digital R&B beats of before for an organic pop soul instrumentalism. Calliope hasn't really looked back since the massive success of her 2019 debut Isolation, and she now proves she can dabble in something a little different with this new record. Sincerely is just silk personified. Like, if you thought Erika de Casier was silky, well, then listen to Calliope, because it's got that soft and sophisticated percussion, those savory and deep bass lines, and of course, Callie's effervescently sweet harmonies. The record runs so smoothly throughout. It's a really classy experience as the instrumentals float through these very dreamy and watery environments. Callie complements the music with a lush confidence, making this album something that can really foster one's own confidence, even in the face of some moody introspection. Now, it's not an album that takes a lot of risk or deviates from its central path, so it can flow a little too seamlessly throughout and can become a little mundane by the end. There really aren't any standouts on this album. But I mean, the melodies are so rich and soothing, and the stripped back songwriting makes this album a pretty comforting experience, even if a little too comforting at times. I'm thinking another like high 6 and another B tier. Okay, you still with me? Good. All right, let's keep going. Next, we have the 6th full-length LP from Swedish cloud rap pioneer Young Lean. Titled after his birth name, Jonaton continues Young Lean's pivot away from hazy cloud rap to more pop-adjacent indie developments like we saw on his alias Jonaton Leander 96's 2023 album, Sugar World. And yeah, we get some pretty straightforward, fuzzy indie-tronica cuts with easygoing pop movements and soul and chord progressions here. Topically, Jonaton is clearly a breakup album, seeing Young Lean equate the breakup to the apocalypse, filling him with questions and paranoia about all the decisions that he made during his relationship. It can get pretty dark, but always maintains a sense of sweetness and sugar when Young Lean compares kisses to shotguns and candy to violence as minor guitar chords reverberate alongside brighter keys and background strings. And while I can definitely appreciate this sentiment and the direction this record is trying to go in, it ends up coming through rather flat and bare bones. The instrumentals are pleasant enough, especially when synths are incorporated into the moody guitar work, pushing a sense of regret and confusion for the world. But the song structures remain quite plain and rely heavily on Young Lean's vocal presence for melody and drive. And let's be honest, Young Lean he's never been a great vocalist, and this record suffers from poor tone and a serious lack of attractive melodies. It can be fairly grating when Lean kind of just flounders about the beats, always on the verge of finding the right note or melody, but never really getting there, never really finding it. So while Jonaton is an intriguing personal reflection with a nice contrast between the bitter and the sweet, it sonically falls a little flat. So I'm thinking a 4 or 4.5 out of 10 and a low C tier for sure. Okay. Now this is what I'm talking about. Infamous abstractionist and New York rapper Billy Woods' 13th studio album, GOLLIWOG. This album it's spectacular. It's hard to describe just how good of a lyricist Billy Woods is. The wordplay, the tone, the imagery, the humor, the cadence, and the rhyme schemes are just above all else in an incredibly singular Billy Woods way. It's clear that he is a true scholar and master when it comes to prose, and it's always just such a joy to try to pick apart all the different meanings and interpretations of his poetry. It makes his work and this album some of the most nuanced experiences in modern music. On this record, GOLLIWOG, Woods utilizes the racist Gollywog doll as a symbol of childlike fear in the presence of social injustice, especially the colonialism and the African slave trade, as well as poverty, depression, torture, and all sorts of terrifying things that are unfortunately true and real to human existence. In his lyrics, Woods is always expertly referencing pop culture, historical events, and his rap influences, especially MF Doom. And everything here is coded in horrifying space of horror movies, myths, cryptids, racism, and generational trauma. And there's also a distinct dystopian feel to the songs as Woods and guest features Elucid, Bruiser Wolf, and Cavalier detail these dense pictures of rundown cityscapes, abandoned childhood homes, and failed rebellions. And this isn't even mentioning some of the most pristine and interesting horrorcore beatwork I've ever heard. The sound is a pretty experimental approach to the classic East Coast hip-hop framework with these ghostly melodies, hypnotic drum samples, and a wide array of fizzling little synths. It's abstract, but carries a poignant direction of fear, like a child slipping under the covers out of fear for their open closet door. I mean, all of the producers on this, whether it's LP, Kenny Segal, or The Alchemist, all legends, they masterfully add their own flavors to the overall themes of terror and dread. The only real knock I have against this album is that a few tracks feel a bit short and some concepts less than complete, taken away from the substantialness of the album, especially when those instrumentals are usually the more subtle and unmemorable moments. But this is still a detailed and compelling listen throughout. GOLLIWOG is cursed in all of the right ways. It somehow communicates such large and nuanced ideas with a real sense of intimacy. It's so up close and personal, but indicative of all the context that leads to such personal moments. I don't care who you are, this is a must listen. You gotta listen to this album. And I think it's one of Billy Woods' best, and that's really saying something. So this is gonna be the first S tier for sure. It's a solid or maybe even high 8.5 out of 10 on my scale. All right, on to the alternative metal giants, the top selling UK pop duo Sleep Token and their fourth studio LP, Even in Arcadia. This album, instrumentally, is quite soft and melodic alternative metal. It goes for pretty dark moods and epic environments. It's slow moving, soaked in dreamy piano and ethereal spaces. It's also extremely auto-tuned, alongside some of the cleanest and most plastic sounding production, which kind of give the album an AI generated feel to it. It's a little uncanny, honestly. But despite these longer track lengths in the songs, they're pretty basic pop formulas, and even alternative R&B structures with trap drum work and an edgy gent guitar. Low key sounds like
Drake
of metal to me. Maybe I'm reaching with that, but the vocals, while technically sound, are honestly pretty obnoxious in their overly warbly melodies and Ed Sheeran-esque refrains, and of course the occasional metal adjacent growls. The lyrics are surprisingly vain too, faintly brushing on topics of isolation and frustration through ironic capitalistic brags and run-of-the-mill pop phrasing. Although the instrumentals are concise, the band struggles with its influences, ultimately floating in a limbo between alternative pop, metal, and R&B, never really choosing a direction to go in. And as a result, the record becomes quite dull, sluggishly wandering in its pristine landscape of plasticky atmospheres, neither embracing nor disgracing any of its musical elements. I think the best moments are when the band decides to add a little energy during the noisier alt metal sections, especially prominent on the first track, but unfortunately these moments are far and few between. It honestly reminds me of Post Malone in both the lead singer's voice and the emptiness and cliche nature of the overall sound, at least the most recent Post Malone records. I'm not one who really cares enough to comment if this is even really metal or not. It ultimately doesn't matter to me, because either way, this record is simply boring and doesn't offer any real substance to grab onto either. And it's like a high 2.5 out of 10 for me, and it's going to land itself at the very bottom of D tier. Okay, this next album is actually a mixtape, and is the debut mixtape from LA cloud rap and trap producer and rapper Lucy Bedroque. Clearly, as a response to Playboi Carti's album Unmusique, this tape is named Unmusique, but ironically it thrashes Carti's album with some insane rage production. This might honestly be the best and definitely the most adventurous rage project of all time. And I know the genre hasn't existed for all that long, but Lucy Bedroque is really putting themselves on the map with this. The 19-year-old has managed to produce some of the most vibrant and textured trap beats known to man, layering all kinds of synths and piano keys in these fluttering leads that are then boosted by wall-tumbling bass and a consistently monstrous kick distortion that really takes the rage genre to new heights. The songs are fast and digital. It feels like a euphoric high you might get from beating the final level of Sonic. It's also bubbly and boisterous, and Bedroque adds a surprisingly rich display of melody, an aspect of rage music that has been largely missing or definitely not done this well. The tape doesn't deviate from this sound at all and isn't a proper album experience really. It is a mixtape, but it's an exciting project nonetheless by one of the most exciting new faces in the EDM hip-hop scene. So I'd give this a solid 3.5 out of 5 for a mixtape, and definitely an addition to the A tier. Okay, the next record is from another smaller artist. This little record is, I believe, the second album from independent South Korean metal musician Bon. The album is called Newman, and is a nice addition to the ever-growing Korean noise rock scene populated by the likes of Parannoul, Broken Teeth, and Asian Glow, who was actually featured on the final track of this album. Bon here follows the new wave of Korean emo, but in a much harsher, classic post-hardcore manner through a massively hazy mix of metal guitars, raw drumming, and a dense, bittersweet atmosphere. It's impressive how hulking this record sounds, especially when the kick drums drive into the gazing guitars. There's just this tremendously satisfying bulk that is really a trait of sludge metal more than anything, but it's paired with a more rapid and exciting tempo here. The songwriting is solid too, playing around with some pretty technical beats and syncing the layered guitars so that progressions hit hard, whether you're really looking into them or not. But I will say that Bon sticks a little too closely to the sound you hear on the first few tracks, and the technical precision doesn't necessarily make up for a sense of burnout, really, by the end. And the vocals, mostly screams, really aren't great either. In classic emo style, they're more or less relegated to the background, but still manage to be abrasive and add an unnecessary dissonance to the overall sound. Regardless though, the sludgy toxicity and nostalgic nature of the album are well worth checking out, and it's definitely another 6.5 out of 10 and B tier album. And he's an act that I'm definitely looking forward to in the future, seeing what he has up his sleeve. Okay, moving on up, next we have the Australian rock band and their 7th full-length release, Carpe Diem Moon Man. The Psychedelic Porn Crumpets, one of the craziest band names ever, are here again with that oh so fuzzy and compressed psychedelic goodness. The most notable part of this group and this particular record sound is the guitar, and that guitar must literally be on fire with how awesome and heavy these riffs are. Almost every riff is laced with a wet distortion that soaks the listener into the cracking rhythms, some soaring high above and flushed out solos, and some digging deep in the nasty bellows of the mix. I just love it. They even delve into the brighter, more intricate delicacy of math rock guitars on the third track, Quick Maths, and some spacier neo-psych sections later on. The percussion is constantly upbeat and fulfilling too, as they push these festering head spaces, feeding into the infectious distortion. And lyrically, I think the second verse on the fourth track, Weird World Awoke, sums it up. Quote, "The world is weird and you exist. The world is weird and I exist. The world is fermenting in weird." And I wouldn't want it any other way, because it is the wacky anecdotes of the universe and the places the mind goes while on psychedelics that help fuel the great energy of this record. It unfortunately can't hold this energy through the entirety of the record, losing it a little in the 6th and 8th tracks, where the fiery guitar is replaced by some less interesting, clean acoustics. But regardless, the surging psychedelics and eccentric deliberations here are really a love letter to the psych greats of like the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix, but with a fresh coat of paint for this new era of music we're in. And for that, Moon Man is quite good. Maybe another 7.5 out of 10 and definite A tier. Alright, just 4 more albums. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Hopefully you found something that you might like so far. We just got a few more to go. This next one is a bit of a surprise, actually. But the legendary UK indie pop band Stereolab released their 12th studio album, which is their first in 15 years. These guys really revolutionized the neo-psych sound in the 90s with their cute electronics and mind-bending soundscapes, sometimes going on for 15 minutes or longer in one song. Now, they sort of faded out of relevancy with a few subpar releases in the late 2000s, but here they return with confidence on instant holograms on metal film. And I think that's because the band has something to say. The record is full of bold social commentary, criticizing corrupt corporations, the rich, and war, while taking the listener on a journey of spiritual discovery, becoming closer with a capacity to love that shatters the ego. The words are simple here, but effective in pushing a sort of curiosity for what may lay beyond social constructs. And the music complements these themes, constantly ticking in smooth rhythms as buttery bass lines, secure glitzy melodies, soft keyboards, and squishy synthesizers. And I actually think squishy is a good way to describe the overall sound of this thing. The instrumental variety of flutes, trombones, brass, acoustic guitar, analog synths, mellotrons, all of it is kept in a twee little mix, softly bouncing up and down as the band teeters on ambience. The instrumental diversity is fantastic, but maybe it's just the time of the day I've been listening to this, but I found myself nodding off as the rhythms keep a similar pace and continue to mellow out throughout. And ultimately, this mellow approach to almost every track, aside from maybe Melody is a Wound and Electrified Teeny Bop, allow the album to fade into the background a little, blending into its own environments. It's a lovely sound with wonderfully warm textures and a progressive message to juxtapose, but it doesn't quite achieve that true hypnotism that their previous work does, at least for me. So definitely worth a try. I'm glad to see this band back making music, but I can't necessarily recommend this to everyone. Yeah, it's going to be another 6 out of 10 and a B tier album. All right. You may have been looking forward to this one. This one is country sensation Morgan Wallen and his 4th studio album, I'm the Problem. Yeah, Morgan, you are the problem. No, controversy aside, this album is 2 hours of the most basic, flat, unremarkable country pop possible. It's got some nice, glossy acoustic guitar plucking and those moody pedal steel guitars that you can never really go wrong with in country music. It also has a rather spacey atmosphere, giving plenty of room for each instrument to breathe, especially Wallen's pretty classic sounding country voice. But that's pretty much all of the interesting things about this record. Narratively, it seems like Wallen is loosely addressing the controversy by kind of just shaking it off, just saying, hey, I'm just a guy, my bad, people do things. And honestly, that's worse than just ignoring it altogether, because it makes it extremely difficult to have any sympathy for the singer as he wallows about his love life and public perception. And ultimately, there's just zero substance to hold on to with his lyrics or the music as a whole, really. I can't say it's the worst. Like I said, some of the instrumentation is nice, it's pleasant. But it actually has a similar quality to the Sleep Token album in its very plasticky, pseudo-trap, almost AI-generated sounding production. I'm not sure why this sound seems to be so popular, but it just sounds fake to me. It reminds me of watching a 3D movie with 3D glasses back in the day. It has the potential to be cool, but your brain just sees right through the trick, and it doesn't work. And anyways, like I said, this is wholly unremarkable, with the occasional total flop like Kisser in Front of You and Miami. And it goes on for way too long without any variation. It's a complete dozer. And for that, I can't really recommend this to anyone, even diehard country fans. I'm feeling like a 2 out of 10 and the first F tier. It's really difficult to get through. Okay, the next album is a big step up from that. And as you can see, the last two albums basically have the same album cover. But we're talking about this one, and that is the debut from Chicago rapper John Michelle and producer Anthony James. This is called Ego Trip and is a magnificently grand hip-hop expedition, brazenly energetic and just big. Everything about this album, from the confident raps to the boisterous production, is big. In fact, the thesis of this record, and you might have gathered this from the title of the album, is Ego, where Michelle unabashedly flexes his success and work ethic in the face of doubters and a marginalizing society. There are no apologies here. It's all confrontation, ceremoniously boasting about perseverance while still taking time to reference its influences like Jay-Z, Common, and Kanye West. And speaking of, the production here is really what you come for when it comes to this album. The chipmunk soul sampling is peak. It's such a hype and grandiose version of the signature old Kanye sound, but with sick electric guitar and jazz drum incorporations. It's genuinely epic and inspirational when soulful female vocals match clean guitar solo snippets and glorious strings in a huge, dignified environment. I mean, just listen to the sampling on the 6th track, Preacher. The power and the influence of it, it sounds like it came from a Kanye West wet dream. But yeah, Preacher, Going Down, Nobody, and the final track, World's End, are absolute highlights in their monumental beatwork. Huge shout out to Anthony James for blessing us with those. Now, when it comes to the actual rapping on the project, I would say it's average for the most part. Michelle's bars fit the conviction and the confidence of the instrumentation, and they're not offensive at all. They just aren't that interesting. They're pretty one notes, settling into quite simple wordplay and a serious lack of world building or imagery. The rapping ultimately feels like a side act to the production, and I think the album could definitely benefit from some more nuanced lyricism while maintaining its confident and egotistical vibe, of course. Nonetheless, this is a nice throwback with some superbly soulful and inspiring production, and I think it belongs towards the top of B tier, like a high 6.5 out of 10 for me. Alright, you can see the last one here, probably in the thumbnail, but man, it is hard to say something that hasn't been said about this last artist I want to talk about today, and that is the iconic experimental rock band Swans and their 17th studio album, Birthing. Swans, they're a one-of-a-kind band, highly influential to many different types of music, including the no-wave movement of the 80s, the post-rock renaissance of the 90s, and the noisy big band noise rock music so many have tried to recreate in the 2010s. But no one has quite captured the raw emotion, the pure human instinct towards music and rhythm like Michael Gira and his Swans have. And Birthing, being the so-called final big music album for the group, is no different in its accomplishments. If you've been reading my reviews before I started this YouTube channel, then you may know that Swans' live album, Live Rope, was actually my my favorite album of 2024. And while Birthing takes a lot of the concepts from Live Rope and executes them in an even tighter, more cohesive manner, where Live Rope can be overly ambient and nonsensical at times, Birthing brings those ideas into concentrated expulsions of head-bobbing rhythm and rhapsody. Swans just have a way of sucking you into these gargantuan progressions, starting with the simplest derivation of a guitar riff or drum beat, or even just draws shamanistic vocals. And as this record displays, the band will slowly build upon this simple foundation, funneling a truly spiritual energy as guitar, drums, and distortion layer in palatial chasms of power and yearning. You get these wonderfully gothic choir chants and lap steel guitar too that add to mind-blowing drones and monstrous environments, creating a black hole sound you're sure to be swallowed up into. And it just sounds so important. It's so all-encompassing, especially when DjRUM is exploring such primal and deep-rooted feelings of universal power, purity, and purpose. Except where the last two projects of this album trilogy, it is part of a trilogy, those albums mostly discussed death and departing this world. Birthing is about creation, sort of completing this cycle of life. DjRUM's lyrics are guttural and sometimes pretty disgusting, but they communicate a real and relatable longing for meaning. Not necessarily understanding the meaning or even needing it to survive, but just belonging alongside it. It's a vague message, but it's an all-powerful one. And while this record isn't perfect, I mean, at times it's pretty derivative of their past music, and it can be quite exhausting to take in. It's almost 2 hours long. It is, at heart, an exceedingly immersive look into human nature and just the boundless effects of sound. Birthing is impetus, and I have to give it a 9 out of 10, and it's going to top this list on the test. Alright, wow, that's going to do it for the video. I have over an hour of footage. This is definitely going to be my longest video by far, but I'm done yapping now. I don't know if I've ever yapped this much in my life, but if you enjoyed listening to me yap and talk about these records in this type of format, then like I said earlier, let me know in the comments below and consider subscribing for more as well. But if you did not enjoy this type of video, let me know that as well, because I probably won't do it again. This obviously did take a very long time to make. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. If you're still here, this has been Colin, aka the Music Canon, and I'll see you guys in the next one.